What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Throw Show, where we provide the roadmap to throwing far.
Bam.
So, yeah, that was created by Trevor, not me. Trevor, good job.
Thank you.
So, what we want to talk about today is most of the high school seasons are starting. The high school season's starting to slow down a little bit. Pennsylvania's got their state championship this week, so by the time this podcast goes out, the state comp will be over. Illinois is this week. A whole bunch of people we train online were a little bit last week. Iowa was last week. New Jersey's in 2 weeks, so next week. But with all these meets sort of finishing up for the season, what we thought would be good is to go over for the junior class now in high school is, what can these kids expect as far as being recruited, what they should be doing as far as looking for and talking to other coaches at the collegiate level, and what they should expect financially, what they should expect as far as their experiences and what level they should really be thinking about competing at based off of what their distances are. So I think this is a good, productive discussion. I think it might provide a dose of reality for a lot of people who think that they're going to get a full ride being a shot putter.
Yeah.
So, Trevor, start us off since you've been. Trevor was the throws coach at Toledo, so he's got a really good perspective on the collegiate system, the collegiate throws world, and I feel like I have a decent perspective too. Just from today, I was talking with a Division I coach for about 35 minutes before the training session this afternoon. So it's like I feel like we have a pretty decent network and experience of what we were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and just a lot of it too is just going through the process with our own throwers. And the high schoolers we have here, a lot of them have been recruited. A lot of them have gotten really big scholarships too. And we've kind of gone through that process with them and seen what, talk to the coaches who come to visit them, see what they're looking for, talk to our athletes, see what they're looking for in coaches and in colleges and everything. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people, we often get the question of, people ask, what can I do to get recruited by college? Mm-hmm. And there's one big fat answer is you got to throw far. Honestly, it comes down to just your distances, because most of the time, going to be completely honest, coaches go to the list, they look at the list, look at the top people on the list, and they just go down and start contacting the top 10 on each state or something like that. Right. And just it's you throwing far is going to be the number one.
At Toledo, you had the women's team. You didn't have a men's team. What would you say would be the direct number that you were looking for a woman to come to the MAC and to compete? For shot and disc.
Yeah. I would look at anyone over 40 feet, 38 to 40 feet in shot.
As a junior,
and 130 in disc.
As a junior.
But I would, and that would be like someone who I'd just want to bring onto the team. Getting a scholarship would probably be, I would look at more like 43 feet in the shot, and maybe a substantial scholarship, 43
to 45 probably would be,
and then 43 to 45, and then 140 in disc probably
as juniors. So I think that's juniors, I think that's where a lot of people need to be clear is that you throw that early on, and I think that's pretty important, is that you have a big mark out as a junior. Or if you didn't have a really stellar junior year, then early in the indoor season you wait to hold off from signing or doing anything.
Yeah.
In that early junior or early senior year, you drop a bomb indoors, or you get to some summer meets or some fall meets and you try and get a big mark out there, and now all of a sudden you pop up on the radar. And I think that's what for men, I think a real simple baseline is you throw 55 feet and 160 as a junior, you might pop onto some radars, or like where people are like, okay, who's this person? Like, let's just look at them. And then all of a sudden you start throwing 56, 57 as a junior and 170, I think, as a junior. And then it's like, okay, now the big time schools are going to start to recruit you.
Yeah.
You know, because they're going to expect, okay, if he can go 170 as a junior and 55 to 57, probably go 60 to 65 as a senior, and hopefully 180 to 200 as a senior. So that's the way I look at it for the men, and then exactly what you said for the women.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of puts it, and that goes to like that top echelon of the Division I level. I wouldn't say that's necessarily, if you're looking at Monmouth, who's a really good throws school, they're not recruiting people who are 62, 63 footers. They're getting guys that are coming in that might only have thrown 55 feet in high school as seniors. Mm-hmm. And they're still able to produce guys that are 18-meter throwers, 19-meter guys all the time. So it's like, don't hear these numbers and be like, I'm done. Right. There's places that will develop you. And I think that's another thing, is that there's a lot of coaches willing to take a risk on a lower level athlete because they know they can develop them.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess that sort of leads into that next question, is like somebody who is a little bit more raw. Mm-hmm. What are the numbers or what are those telltale signs that you would have been looking for at Toledo?
What do you mean by that? Like,
you see a chick and I'm thinking about, who was the girl that won from Iowa State, Christina Hillman. She was like that, not until her senior year, she really hadn't done anything. Or Raven Saunders, she was a 40-foot shot putter going into her senior year. No one had ever really known who she was. Yeah. Because she didn't compete really her junior year. She was hurt. She had thrown well her sophomore year. But somebody where you're like, I'm going to take a flyer on this person. They only threw 37 feet. Yeah. But they're 5'10", and they're a stud volleyball player, like that girl from Pennsylvania. Remember that you were actually looking at?
Yeah.
I think she did go to Toledo.
She did
to play volleyball. Then, what would be something that you might look for as outliers who aren't hitting those numbers, but somebody that you would take a risk on?
I mean, I think the main things and there's kind of two sides of the spectrum. Like there's like, I think it's good. It's good if you're in either camp. Like you can be very attractive by being attractive to a coach by being raw, in the sense that you haven't trained very much, but you've got a high. I mean, basically, I'll just talk about this for a little bit. So a raw athlete, what I would see this is something I have to see them throw. Mm-hmm. If they're all over the place, if their technique's terrible, but I see that they've got like a really big finish on the shot, and they move kind of jerkingly. They're not like slow through the circle, but they kind of jerk through the circle a little bit. But their technique's just all over the place. And they're, they might be fouling throws all the time. They might be, fouling at a sector, whatever.
Right now, Ashlyn pops into my mind because she's got that.
Ashlyn is the perfect example of that.
But,
and then
like going through a circle.
And Brandon too. Brandon's like that as well.
Yeah, they haven't had the reps in yet.
Yeah, that's I would see someone like that and say like, wow, okay, if this person just gets thousands and thousands of throws under their belt, like they're going to be legit. Yeah. Because they're probably new to the sport. Either they're new to the sport or they just haven't got a lot of training in, and because they haven't got a lot of training in, you get them to train, and most likely they're going to be good. Mm-hmm. But the other end of the spectrum is that someone who has trained a lot, I think there's a lot of benefit, and part of the rationale behind this is that I see, like, when we think about like the best throwers, what we say is one of the main reasons why they're good is because they've been doing it for so long, right? Mm-hmm. And they've had so many throws under their belt that they can get the feeling. They know how to move the shot. They know how to move in the circle, and they've done it so many times that they become so efficient at how they're moving that just over time and more time, and as their body keeps developing, as they get stronger, that's what yields even higher distances than someone who's newer at the sport. Yeah. And so, like, what I like to see with people who are more developed is more of the mental side of it, and like if I see someone with good technique and that moves well, I like to see how they talk to their coach. Like, are they responsive when they talk to their coach? Did they take cues well? Are they positive or are they negative when when they're coming out of the circle after a throw? I think it's good if you're can stay positive and can have a good kind of, just communication with your coach. Not like saying like, oh, well, it's because this, and this, like, why aren't I getting,
listening to what your coach says,
listening to your coach, and, maybe giving one or two things like, oh, I kind of felt this in the circle, and, just good communication.
Yeah.
That's really all, is a big part of it. And, if I see that you're communicating well with your coach, you're probably going to communicate with me. And, it's that teamwork that's going to end up, making both of you successful in the long run.
Right.
And so I think if someone who has that, has a big base, a big foundation, and has that good mental side, I think, and especially for every thrower, like, you're not developed. Your body's not developed as a high schooler.
Right.
And there's so much more there that you're going to grow into. And if you can keep that, making your throw more efficient, be like on point on the mental side of things, I think there's a lot of development that even, throwers who have been throwing for, 5 or 6 years as a senior in high school can make.
Right. So what would you say then? Let's put all that stuff to the side and say, okay, now as a high school thrower, or you're recruiting a high school thrower, what are you going to look for outside, like what, like social media wise, grade wise, even everything on the outside.
Yeah.
What could a thrower? So if somebody's in high school, like right now, and they're a 60-foot junior and they want to get recruited, and they've got pictures of them bonging beers, like.
Yeah, don't do that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that does make a big difference. Like, if you're a guy and you're, I think there's, things like if you're chugging beers and, doing all this stupid stuff on social media, most likely that's what you're going to be doing at college,
Right.
And if you're a girl and you're posting, selfies and, scanny pictures and stuff like that, like that's probably how you're going to act when you're in college, and that's not very attractive to a coach at all.
Right.
And on the grade side of things, that's huge. Like a lot of people and a lot of coaches, they're valued by the athletic program in general by how high they can have their GPA on their team.
Yeah.
And that is a big thing when it comes to recruiting, and a lot of people value that outside of how well you perform. And I know a lot of like walk-ons that got onto teams just because they were so smart and they could raise the team GPA.
Yeah.
So like if you are in that position where you don't know if you can even walk onto the team, if you've got a solid GPA, like there's a good chance they might let you on.
Right.
But just as like kind of numbers that I think you should shoot for is if you can have a 3.5 GPA, and if you can have like an 11 to 1200 on your SAT, those are pretty solid numbers, kind of benchmarks that you should shoot for as a and on the academic side of things.
I remember, this is my personal story. I had like a 3.2 cumulative GPA. And the Penn State coach is like, "What's your GPA?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's like a 3.2." And he's like, I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Well, that's like one of the worst areas because we're gonna have to waste a slot on you, but your grades are gonna be good enough that you'll boost the GPA of the team because you'll probably have like a 3.3 or a 3.4, which is what I ended up having in college. But they didn't really want to have to waste a slot on me because they like to waste the slots." Use the slots, which is to get into Penn State, Maine.
Oh, okay.
They would prefer to use a slot on somebody who would have like a 2.6 or 2.7.
Okay,
And it was like because it was like 10 slots a year.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I just think, and that's the thing though, is like if I had a 3.5, I probably could have like argued a little bit more for some financial support early on.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of that does come into play for everybody.
Right. And I know it's a different situation in probably pretty much every school you go to, but I know like at Toledo, and this is something to seriously consider, is that if at Toledo, if you had a 3.5 or higher, you were eligible for both academic and athletic aid. Yeah. And if you had below a 3.5, you had to choose one or the other.
Okay.
So, like, it made it really easy if you had a 3.5 and you were getting, sometimes kids would get, 30-40% of their scholarship from academic, and then the athletic program would only have to match,
right.
Maybe 60-70%.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes you much more valuable to a program if you can have that, have that high GPA and that high
and it's
academics.
Not what's funny is that doesn't even come down to like the scholarship numbers and like budgeting, like how to budget their money around.
Mm-hmm.
That comes down to, from a coach's perspective, if you've got somebody who has a 3.5 or higher, you don't have to deal with their headaches.
Yeah.
You don't have to sit
absolutely.
there
Yeah.
and make sure that they're going to be able to make their grades,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they're not going to do something dumb on the weekend. You know that they're going to hold themselves accountable. And that's the biggest thing is like, dude, the 18 to 24 year, that age range is just a bunch of lunacy and a bunch of idiots. Like if you're a collegiate coach, you're managing, sorry for all the high school kids watching us, but you're about to enter this era. They're so dumb. Like kids are just so dumb. And so for a college coach to see someone who's got a 3.8 and they're throwing, 65 and 200, that's like every coach's dream, because they're like, all right, well, I'm not going to have to deal with the bullshit. I'm not going to have to deal with the headaches. And they're going to be a good athlete. And that's right. Ultimately, like, you want to make yourself marketable, get good grades, don't do anything dumb, and throw really far. Mm-hmm. And you could be the most marketable person on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like that's as a coach, that's what probably the dream is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So what would be, in your mindset, let's pretend you're Trevor Stutzman, you're 17, and you just threw 62 feet, 62.7. But let's say you're like,
wait, I'm a junior or senior?
You're a junior.
Okay.
Let's play the game of what are you going to look for in a coach?
All right. So
what should you look for?
I just actually sat down with one of our athletes and kind of went through, I won't say who he or she is, but I went through who some of the, like, I asked her what some of the main things she's looking for in a college, and I think they lined up pretty closely to, like, if I was in that position, what I would look for.
Okay.
And the three things she said were the team dynamic, and kind of going into how, like, what she didn't want to see in a team is that people, one, that would not take training seriously, not, goof off at training, and that the team would hang out outside of practice, so that, like, the throwers, they're friends, they do stuff together, they talk about throwing, they're serious about what they do, and it's not like they're at practice kind of dealing with each other and then going off and doing their own thing. Like she wants to see, and I think I'd be the same way, that, like, the throwing team, they're close knit and they're doing stuff together all the time, and still crushing training and being serious when it comes down to training time.
Right.
So the team dynamic was the number one thing for her.
Yeah, because if you think about it too, like, the training environment is key. If you're around people with like-minded goals and they see the sport the same way that if you want to be an All-American and they're looking at the sport the same way you are, and your goals are like-minded, now all of a sudden that training environment goes from here to here. And that's the biggest thing, is that if you get into a good training environment, you can add a meter to your throw just because you're in a good situation.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's I think a really, really overlooked aspect.
Yeah. So then the second thing she said, and I actually really, and I can talk about this later, but, like, the order she said these in, I really like. But with the team dynamic first, and the second thing she said was just the campus in general. And, I think to some extent, I think this is probably, most, from what I've seen at least, most girls value the campus in the way of how it feels and, how big it is and stuff like that. And most guys, I think, kind of look at the facility end of it a little bit more and see like, oh, what's their weight room like what's, what kind of stuff do they have and stuff like that. And I think, it goes both ways, to a certain extent, but a lot of times that's how I've seen it, at least. But just with how the campus is in general, and it is something you just got to see on the visit. I mean, all of these things you got to be able to see on the visit, the team dynamic, talking to the, team and everything, just being on campus.
I think when you're going on visits, you need to have these questions like either prepared or in the back of your mind all the time.
Absolutely.
And then
100%.
What do you,
yeah.
I'll weigh in on the campus thing because I think the campus aspect is stupid, but.
Well, and I think this goes into academics a little bit too. And I guess I'll just say this now is that there are a number of things that could change in once you get to school. Number one, your coach could leave.
Yeah.
Which is very, very likely to happen.
I was recruited by a coach, and the day I stepped on campus, he left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it must have been something about me.
Your coach could leave. You could get injured.
Mm-hmm.
Anything could happen that would stop you from throwing. And are you at a place that you would be happy even if you weren't throwing? And I think that's a very serious thing to consider. Like, are you going to be happy here even if you're not throwing? Mm-hmm. And I think when you step on campus, that's something you got to question is if that would be the case or not.
Right.
And, I think, I do agree with you that I think, I certainly don't value that as much.
The campus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that is something that a lot of people do value, and it is something to consider.
I would have buddies come up, they'd be like, Penn State's so big, why? And then they'd come up the third time and they'd be like, okay, this place isn't that big. Like, once you get used to it, it's not. It's normal. Yeah, every place is I think, I went on a lot of recruiting visits, and I've been to a lot of universities, and I'm always like, a place is a place. It just takes you time to figure out how to get around, where you want to be. And I think that's one thing to think about with the campus aspect is it's getting the feeling of it is a little bit harder when you're young and immature and you don't really know where you're going to be in 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
So I wouldn't get hung up on that. I do think the team dynamic is important, and the academic side is important because let's say you don't like throwing anymore, or you get severely injured. What's the support system that sort of gets you out of being an athlete? And that was one thing at Penn State that was awesome was that, dude, we had classes going in as freshmen that taught you how to be a student athlete, what you had to do. It was called BBH 48, and you had to take them 3 days a week your freshman year, and it was how to go to study hall, how to study, how to hold yourself accountable, how to not get sucked in. What's up? It's probably Sam. How to get not sucked into drinking and stuff like that. But then what was cool is on the back end, it was like BBH 50 or whatever, was what to do now that you're not a student athlete at Penn State. Yeah. And that's one thing I think that you have to factor in is if you do get hurt, what are they going to do? Do they just throw you to the wolves, or do they have a support system? And not that that's something you really need to worry about, but it's got to be in the back of your mind.
Yeah, yeah. And that's I'll add with that as well, kind of lumping your major and academics into that too. For one thing, one thing you should look at is what is their academic support. Some places have really good academic support where they it's specifically for athletes, where they lead you through what classes you got to take, and it's just headaches that you don't have to deal with otherwise, and it is good to have that. Yeah. And if you're struggling in classes, they have tutoring and study halls, that's just good stuff to ask about when you're on campus. Yeah. But in addition, when you're choosing your major and stuff, obviously you want to go somewhere that has your major. But you have to realize that, what is it? There's statistics on this.
Dude,
75% or even higher than that of people change their major after they get to school.
Right.
So that's just something to consider.
My dad always says, he's like, how dumb it is that we expect 18-year-old kids to graduate from high school and to know what they want to do for the rest of their life within the next 6 months. And they base a massive life decision off of what they think they want to do as an 18-year-old. That's just so idiotic. Don't even think about that. Dude, what you think your major is, or what you want to have a job for your whole life, isn't going to be what you have a job for. Yeah. I'm guaranteeing you that right now.
What was your major in college?
Religious studies, exactly.
And
Exactly.
nutrition.
Yeah, exactly. But I just think I think as a student athlete, as a a high school kid, and if you're a thrower, you should be sitting there going, okay, when I take this visit, I want to know what are the facilities like. I want to know what's the team dynamic like. What are the kids, what are the athletes say about your coach?
So that was the last thing I was going to get into.
And then how does all that work together? Mm-hmm. What's the weight room like? All that situation. How's that work? What are the academics like? What's the support group outside of the athletic side? Like, do they provide a nutritionist? Do they provide an academic counselor? Do they provide if you need somebody for tutoring? Like, that was a cool thing at Penn State. It was like, if you needed anything, it was, I need a tutor. Okay, you're done. Set up. We'll get you hooked up.
Yeah.
If you need, I need a nutritionist. Well, go over to West and we'll get that done. Everything was taken care of all the time, but the biggest thing is like, what do the kids think about the coach? And then what does the coach say about the kids? Because you also want to try and pick up on the negativity. If the coach is like, well, yeah, that guy, blah, 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 he did this, this, and this, and they're throwing him under the bus, it's sort of like, well, I don't know if that's a good situation. If you want
if the coach is talking bad about athletes, most likely he or she's gonna be talking bad about you as well.
Yeah.
That's just how people work, you know.
Yep.
And it's, I think one of the main things to remember with a coach is that, I know you don't want to think like this, but there is so much turnover with coaches in the collegiate system.
It's a total carousel.
And I think seeing a good team dynamic should be a little bit higher on your, on your ranking list than even the coach, because the team's going to be sticking around. Obviously the team dynamic could change if, with a new coach and everything, but the kids are going to be staying around. The coach might not be, and that's something to look like. Maybe look into the coach a little bit more. Like, is his life set up there? Like, is how long has he or she been there at the school? And like, that's stuff to consider.
I'm just thinking about St. Clair, who's at North Dakota State. Mm-hmm. And it's like somebody's recruiting, or he's recruiting somebody, and they can look at him and say, and I'm not speaking for him, but I think he has 2 kids, and his wife's from that area.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so his wife's from the area. He's been there for a little bit of time. I think their head coach is leaving after this year. He's probably going to get the head job. He should anyway. He's got stupid success. Mm-hmm. Why would he leave? He's in a comfortable situation. It's like, as an outsider, I would look at it like, okay, he's got 2 kids that are growing up. His wife's from that area. They're probably going to stay in that area. I'm going there.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would even argue, McKay at Penn State. His wife's pregnant right now. They're going to have a kid. She's got a good job. He's got a good job. They're probably going to stay. Hopefully, right? And that's where Amin Nikfar is at Stanford. Okay, so he was just at Southeastern. He was at University of New Orleans before that. So he's left 2 schools pretty quickly, but his family's from San Francisco. He's at Stanford. That could be his dream job, even though he went to Cal. Now he's at Stanford. Now he's probably going to stay there for at least 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to sort of take that perspective and then really apply it to your own experience, because you need to do that when you're making your decision.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to point out, we were talking about this earlier, was from the coach's perspective, outside of using social media to sort of gauge what these people are like, what the high school kids are like, and to see how much they value the sport and value those relationships that they might be having. I think it's important for coaches to post on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter as a recruiting tool, as a way to attract people, the way that Martin Marich does at UVA, even McKay at Penn State, Kapos does this at Nebraska, Texas does this really well, UCLA does this pretty well, where they're posting what they're doing in training, they're posting the results that they're having, and they're always posting like, oh man, they've got a good team feel. And so that can be one, it's a way it's a marketing tool for them. Two, it's a way for the parents of the athletes that are there now to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more you're going to engage those parents to say, okay, my little Johnny's doing well there at wherever he's at. And that brings it in. And then parents that have a recruit being taken somewhere, they can sort of look at it and be like, oh man, look at this. The team's together all the time. They're always posting pictures. They're always smiling. They're traveling all over the place. They must love it, So I think it's really important for coaches to take advantage of that aspect of social media.
And I even think that builds the team dynamic even better as well. Just knowing that your coach is taking the time and energy to advertise the athletes that are there as well. And I think that it's kind of a cycle that keeps going and just keeps building the program up.
Right. Absolutely.
But I guess one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit too is so, like we said, all right, you're a 17-year-old, you're a junior, it's the end of the season right now. Like, what does the next year look like for you? Like right now you are, you're finishing up your season. Obviously you want to hit as big a throws as you can as the end of the season, obviously, but what are you doing this summer?
I was just going to say, I think this is what drives me insane with high school kids, how stupid
I'll let you can rant on this for a bit.
And even if you play football or you play field hockey, if you're a woman or whatever it is, right? You should take like a week to 10 days off. And I think you should either take it off right after the state meet's over or after nationals. Ideally, it would be after you go to high school nationals, you put out a good showing, and your family takes a vacation right after nationals. And that's when you take your time off. I go nuts hearing high school kids say, I want a week off after states, knowing that they're going to have another 10 days off later when they take their family vacation. But that's just because I think they're wasting time. I think that after you take that time off, you've got to train. You've got to you've got to sit down and say, okay, what are my goals? I want to focus on improving this lift or improving this throw or getting stronger. I think it's important for juniors, males, to get a meet where they're throwing the 16-pounder. So if you're a 55-footer, you get a meet where you're throwing the 16-pounder and you get that meet at 1550, 16 meters. Now all of a sudden somebody's going, okay, this kid only threw 55 feet, but he's got a meet with the heavy shot at 50 feet plus.
Yeah.
That's a huge benefit. Right now, you are already a leg up. And then you should be posting like every other day, this is what I'm doing in training. Then you should be posting about your academic stuff. Then you should be posting about your family stuff. So you could legitimately coordinate an entire model for what you're
basically
doing.
Making a resume or
for yourself.
or a portfolio of your training.
These are my throws. This is what I'm working on. This is my training. This is what I'm doing and when I'm lifting. This is what I'm doing this summer. This is what I'm doing with my nutrition. This is what I'm doing with my family. And it's all based around making you a better person, and you're trying to learn the sport, learn who you are, spend time with your family, not out doing stupid stuff. And now you spend that whole summer, and then when you start to get recruited that fall really hard, now all of a sudden the coach is like, well, look what he's done all fall. Look what he's done all summer.
Yeah.
Oh, he just did a fall meet and he threw 185 and freaking 60 feet. Oh, wow, he threw the 16-pounder 52, 53 feet. Now, wow, he can handle the heavy shot too. So then they buy into it entirely. And I think men and women have to do that. It's got to be like, you've got to progress. You got to make that progress because you have no idea who's going to come out of the woodworks and beat you. One, but two, you need to get ahead of the recruiting game so that when they start to come look at you, they can sit there and say, well, I can go on your social media and I can see what you've been doing. Yeah. They could call somebody like Trevor or I up and, hey, what are they like in training? Well, dude, they've always got their stuff together. They're always showing up on time. They always have a goal. They're always focused and they always want to get after it. And that's the biggest thing that I think that everybody sort of just lacks because of immaturity, really.
Yeah.
So it drives me nuts because of the immaturity, but it's like that's where I think you and I come in as coaches at the high school level and try and help these kids out. Like, look, this is what you need to do between now and then, and lay it out for them, just the way a normal collegiate coach would do or a post-collegiate coach should do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like a lot of athletes too, they're going to be, if they're a guy, they're going to be playing football, maybe doing something. I mean, they should be doing indoor track in the winter, but sometimes they have other sports. And girls, if you're playing, field hockey or basketball or volleyball. It's fine to have other sports, but if you need to figure out like, is throwing what you want to do in college?
Right.
Because if it is, you still need to be throwing at least, I would say, 3 times a week. 2 to 3 times a week, even while you're doing the other sports.
Yeah, I think a big thing is that if let's say you're playing football, if you're posting, on a Monday night, because Monday's usually the lighter day for football, that you got a whole bunch of throws in, and you're posting that on Instagram, and then Saturday morning or Sunday morning, you go out and you take 30, 40 throws, and you're posting that stuff on Instagram or on Facebook, coaches see that, and they're like, oh my gosh, dude, this guy's a beast football player, and he's still training. He can handle 2 things at once. Yeah. And guess what? That's what business owners are looking for, too. They're sitting there saying the same thing. Later on, they're going, wow, this guy has good grades, and he did well in college. That's somebody you want to have work for you. And that's the thing. It's like that stuff pays off in the long run.
Mm-hmm. So maybe the last thing we could cover here is, signing day is, I think, usually around like the middle of November, maybe November 15th or something. And now signing goes on through the year. Yeah. So you can sign, from middle of November on through the rest of your senior year.
Yeah, whatever, really.
So, like, I guess kind of just talking a little bit about that and what, what college coaches are thinking is most likely. So, I mean, just so like high schoolers know how this kind of works, is that usually what the case is that the college coach has a couple recruits that they're going after, pretty hard.
They're going to want to sign them early.
And they're going to want to sign them early because they're either given so much money from the team as a whole to give to throwers, or they, it's collective with the whole team, and the sooner they can sign someone good, the bigger chunk of the money that the whole team has that they can get. Yeah. So college coaches are probably going to want to sign you pretty early. And usually, even sometimes they'll give you like ultimatums, like, you got to sign by this date or else, we're going somewhere else. Yeah. And like, dude, you, to a certain extent, you need to respect that because it's true that like these college coaches, they are recruiting a lot of people at the same time. So if they're giving you an offer, that's a very big deal. But on the other side of things is that you need to really assess, where you're at in your training.
If you're a 50-foot female, then you sign early. Yeah. If you're throwing 42 feet, you say, you know what? I'm going to wait. Yep. Because when I throw 48, you're going to want me. Yeah. And then somebody comes and I mean, Amanda did this. Mm-hmm. She was the first girl we ever had at Garage Strength. And it was like, she came out of nowhere. She threw 43 plus. She'd thrown 32 the year prior. Mm-hmm. Came out, she threw 40 indoors, and people were like, who's this girl? And now all of a sudden people started to call me. Yeah. She had already signed with a D2 school, and she got out of that, and she didn't sign until right after state. So this late in the game, May, she signed, and Marshall gave her a ton of money to go there, like a ton of money. Yep. And it's like she waited, and then Keith McBride was actually there at the time, and he gave her a ton of cash, and it ended up working out for her because he needed somebody who was decent. She came out of the woodwork, so he looked at her as somebody who's pretty raw, and he had a whole bunch of money left over. And that's the thing. If you play the waiting game right, it can really come in your favor.
Yeah. But, I mean, again, that's,
you got to see where you're at.
If you're getting like a pretty good offer, and you deny it, you might not expect to see that coming back unless you're really hitting some big throws too. Right. So it's definitely a balancing act and something you got to really judge where you're at in your training and where you're at at your recruitment stage.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yep.
But
I agree. All right, Trevor.
Does that wrap it up?
That's pretty good. I just think before we get on the red hot minute, I do think if you're taking a visit, if you're traveling somewhere, you've got to sit there and weigh everything out. Say, coach, facility, campus, academics, what do the athletes think about their coach? What does the coach say about their athletes? What do you value the most? What's the proximity to your family? How close? How many meets do you want your family to come to? What's the cost? And then where you're at, weigh all those things out, and see what they're doing on social media. See what the coaches are doing on social media. See what the coach can provide you, so that way everything you can sort of sit there and scale everything based off of where your value is. And then you can rank your schools as you visit and say, you know, this is where I rank everything. These are the pros, these are the cons, and then make your decision based off of an actual strategic plan, not just being like, well, I want to go to Oklahoma because they have neat colors. You know, it's like, I mean, you could go to Oklahoma and do really well. It's a cool place. But don't go there because of the colors that they have. You got to sit there and rank out like. But I've heard people say that.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Actually, I know somebody at the gym who didn't want to go somewhere because they didn't like the colors. It's like, what? So I didn't even think about that when I used that example. But make sure you're actually using logic to decide where you want to go.
Yeah. Good
Okay. Do you have any questions at all? I have 3.
You got 3.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I did you last time.
Okay. So Trevor, you have coached at the Division I level, you've coached at the Division II level, and you are an All-American on the Division III level. So you pick one of the 3. Where are you going as an athlete?
I mean, I'm going to a Division I school, but at Division III, there is a lot of opportunity for you to make a difference in your own training.
Yeah.
And I think I always question, like, you know, if I would have went to a Division I school, like, what would have happened? And I think it could have been that I would have gotten to a really good program with a really good coach, and I would have done really well. But
I think they would have tried to turn you into a hammer thrower.
That could also be a possibility, and
which might have been good.
Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
But I think at the Division III level, I actually got lucky with a good coach early on, but then after he left, I was by myself, and I could learn a ton about throwing just by talking to different people and doing my own thing, and it's kind of like that, just internal motivation kind of pushed me to do pretty well. But probably Division I, if I, at hindsight, would take something.
Okay. So you're a high school boy, okay? End of the junior year. What do you think? You get to pick one of the shots that you should train with, a 20-pounder or an 18-pounder. You're end of your junior year, so you have a whole nother year throwing the 12, but you want to put on a good showing with the 16.
I think if this is right after my junior year, I'd throw the 20 for a bit. Yeah.
That's crazy. I love the 20, so. Now you're a college coach. You're at a mid-major, so you're at Toledo. But maybe you're in the MAC, but you have a little more money, so you're at like Bowling Green or Kent. I feel like Kent dominates the MAC. So
they all have pretty similar.
Let's pretend you're Nathan Fanger, who, by the way, because we're on this, Nathan Fanger, when he recruited me, he was the best recruiter of all time for me.
Yeah. He's legit. He is absolutely legit.
He talked to me all the time. He was great with my parents. He knew exactly what to do, and I believe he's legit because whatever he says, he does, and that's why he's been at Kent for as long as he has. That's why he's the man, and he's had national champs at Kent. Dude, I still wish I would have went there, but okay. So let's go back. You're at a mid-major, so you don't have a ton of money to throw around. Are you going to look for a trained thrower who's like a 40 to 42 footer for a female? Or are you going to look for a raw female who's only ever thrown for like a year, but she's like a volleyball player, super explosive?
All right. So this goes down to my core being as an egotistical coach. And this is probably what most other coaches are thinking. I don't think it's the right thing to think, but I do kind of like someone who I can put into my own system
and mold them.
Yeah. But I think a thrower is better off, and I think would be better off, and a coach should value them more if they've already been in a system, and that you can take this if they've been successful in that system, that you don't have to just change them automatically to what you have done for the last, however many years.
I think and
that you can mold your system to match what they're doing and take them on from there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that's something that we've struggled with our own athletes because we've had so much success on the high school level, and then getting them to transition well to the collegiate level where, you know, we've got Morgan who's, you know, an All-American already. We've gotten All-Americans at the collegiate level, you being one of them and Jason being one of them. And it's like we've done a good job with some of them, but then some of them we haven't done a good job preparing. And it's like because we have such a trained system, we've got to figure out a way as coaches to sort of transition them better. But also we've got to figure out a way as coaches to sort of hold that power just slightly to help the other coach getting involved in the relationship then. Like, hey, I want to lay this out and I want you to be open to hearing what I have to say because there's certain specific things about this athlete that I want you to respect that I know and that you can learn from and to use us as a resource. You know, because we also have a clue. So I think it's like us figuring that out.
It's both ways a little bit. You know, it's the athlete having an open mind going into the coach, and it's the coach having an open mind that, you know, they should respect the system that the athlete's been in as well. I think it goes both ways for sure.
Okay, you're a high school female. You got really good academics, and you've thrown 48 feet and 155 feet. Are you going to go to the Big Ten or the SEC?
Big Ten.
Okay, that was easy. That was a slam dunk. Okay, let's say your name is Morden Geist. You're recruited by everybody, and I didn't list Arizona on here. I wanted to let's say you're Pippery or Jordan Geist. You're one of those guys. It's just you're the man. You're a 75-foot shot putter, and you're throwing 200 plus in the discus, and you can go wherever you want, anywhere. And I didn't include Arizona, but I was thinking about Jordan, so it's sort of funny because I didn't include him here. But let's say you get to pick out of these 5 schools.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Penn State, Nebraska, Georgia, Texas, or North Dakota State? Those are that's a pretty good list.
See, I would have, this is just terrible, but so biased. I'm ridiculously biased because I'm from Penn State. I mean, from PA, but I would pick Penn State.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I think they've got a really good system going on there, and McKay's killing it. But I would probably put Stanford up there too, I think, right now. Just because of, I think they've got a good system there too. It's in California and it's really good academics as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I was thinking North Dakota State just because I would want to go train with that group, but also throw for an underdog school.
Yeah. No, that's
That's my only.
Destroy your conference meet every year.
Yeah, every year you win all the time. So, all right. So I would say to wrap this up again, when you guys are taking your recruiting visits, pay attention to all the little details. I think it's big for athletes to come prepared for a visit because then the coach sees oh wow, that athlete came with a list. They're the one. And it's the athlete, not mommy, not daddy. You come in and you take responsibility for your decision because it's your life. Mommy's not going to be there wiping your ass when you're in college, and neither is daddy. He can't come and save you out of every single situation. They're always going to be supportive, but you have to take the initiative for all this, and you'll show the coach when you come with a list of all this stuff and you're writing notes and you're listening and you're asking pointed questions. The coach is going to take you a lot more seriously.
That is a huge thing. From the people I've recruited, I can tell right away, if it's the parents that are reaching out or the athlete.
Yeah.
If on a visit, it's the athlete who's asking the questions, if it's the athletes that's taking the initiative on things, or the parents. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
This is your decision. Take control of it. It's you that's going to be coming here, not your parents. And yes, you're going to have to, cut the cord.
Right. Yeah, and figure out all that stuff. So I think all that stuff is really, really important. So again, tune in next week to the Throw Show. we are providing you the roadmap to throwing further.
That's right.
Peace.